Hello and welcome to Ethan's Essential Existential Book Pod. Today we're joined by a very special guest. He is a high school student from Canada. He's a very intelligent, skilled, and even a handsome guy. And he's one of my favorite people I've met doing podcasting. Please welcome Ethan Edwards. Ethan, how's it going? What's happening in your life? Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I've been pretty great, honestly. I'm actually just really excited to be on the pod today.
Short and sweet, perfect. That's what I love to hear. Today, Ethan, as well as myself, will be discussing our newest addition to the Brain and Memory Club, 100 Years of Solitude, written by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, a legendary novel written in 1967 that is beloved to many and regarded as one of the quintessential books that every human should read. Winning a Nobel Prize in 1982, it was a book heavily requested by our viewers since we started this essential existential book club. It follows an epic tale of 7 generations of the Boneta family that also spans 100 years of turbulent Latin American history from the post-colonial 1820s to the 1920s. The book begins following the founding of a new town in Colombia named Maconda by its founder and start of it all, Jose Arcadio Boneta. The book follows the history of the family through a complex and even confusing journey that highlights human nature and the passing of time. Throw all morals and ethics and questions out of the window and take the story at face value as you embark in this magical realism novel that will leave you with a newfound knowledge. You'll explore the town and how it goes through plagues, hurricanes, civil war after civil war, to invasions, strikes, and massacres, and even the town and their own egoism and the trap of nostalgia that provides their solitude. Anything that you wanted to say, Ethan?
This book doesn't follow a linear basis in the guidelines of literature, but it does deal with significant literary concepts that can be found all through literature history, and again is instead told like through a matter of fact perspective, and it gives a way of retelling a story not through the colonizer but as a neutral perspective of the inhabitants, and it reflects Marquez's life and the things he went through living in Colombia during the 1920s, it's based off his real life events.
Yeah, and the story will be explained as, we speak on the matters of the book. But first, I just want to discuss the theme with you, Ethan, what you think it is and what it means to you,
Yeah, to me, the human nature of solitude is very highlighted, an important theme throughout, and is continuously repeated over and over between the generations of the family, and is seen starting with Jose Arcadio, who delved into delirium in his lab, locked away from the world, stuck to a tree, and lived out the rest of his life alone. And then we see his son follow the same path, who in his golden years is making goldfish and remaking them and doing that until his death. And even the cursed visitor and the girl, Rebecca, who was eating earth when she came as an orphan, alone, and died alone again.
Yeah, I agree with you. Another theme that I found personally was time and how it moves. Starting with the very beginning of the novel, the very first line, actually, and this is how it goes. Many years later, as he faced the firing squad, Colonel Arleno Boneta remembered the time his father took him to discover ice. This is one of the best openings to a book I have ever read, and it hooked me immediately and made me just want to read front to back. It implied the difficulty of time and that it is not linear, but it is a moving circle that stops, goes, and repeats itself in different ways. Time is used throughout the novel with the reader, and it takes the reader from past to present to future, and it can actually become pretty confusing due to like the naming of the characters and the repeat of the generations, and how through generations they use the same names, and not to mention they also have repeating traits of their ancestors. For example, like the Aluenos, they tend to be withdrawn but with lucid minds, and the Jose Arcadios tend to be more impulsive and enterprising. And this actually promotes the idea of identity and oneself and how unclear it can be. And then we can make the same mistakes over and over from generation to generation. And it just kind of highlights how time isn't really what we think it is. And people individuals aren't what we think they are. And that it's just like it's a circle. And even in the story, it's mentioned by Ursula Guardian, the grandmother, on page 334.
I just wanted to touch on really quickly, like how Marquez is able to turn this real fact, but is almost translated through mythology and these things that he went through. It's his life, but it's through mythology, but no one does anything. It's just documented realism, and and it's not really acknowledged the mythical of it. It's just what it is, you know. Like I said, it's matter of fact. And so yeah, I just wanted to like how it translates to the real events that happened in Colombia during that time. It's almost exactly the same, but retold, you know, with this mythology. And so yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. Okay, it is now time for the lightning round. The quick lightning round of questions, 3 questions submitted by viewers of the show, and we're going to answer them quickly as fast as we can. Our first question comes from the viewer Sammy. Who is your favorite character? Yeah, my favorite's probably Amaranta. You know, she held strong in her morals and didn't get married if she wasn't in love. Okay, nice. For me, I'd have to say Colonel Albuena Buendia. He is who was introduced to me first, and so I always paid more interest to him throughout the story whenever he was re-mentioned or mentioned again. And so I just thought his story was unique, but also, you know, similar to others in a way, but I just found him the most engaging. Our next question is from Brandy, and she asks, what did you think of the writing? Personally, I thought the writing was brilliant and flowed very well, especially the language that was learned when you learned about someone's death. You often heard it in the past tense in the first, and then explained later, but in a more beautiful and rewarding way. Yeah, you know, I thought the writing was very provoking, especially in the more saddening and violent moments. Like, it's written at so face value with a lack of emotion, but the lack of emotion makes you feel, like, gutted and, you know, uncomfortable. So, yeah, our last question here from Mark, and he asks, if there was one thing you could change about the book, what would it be? The incest, yeah. Yeah, I have to agree. The inbreeding incest is obviously trying to convey a message, and there's some sort of point, but, you know, the intimacy of it can be very hard to read without feeling a little uncomfortable. So, yeah, moving on, I just want to spend a couple minutes talking about some concepts and some things and notes I took about the book that I found interesting, and something I just want to share. And so the first one I want to talk about is kind of the corruption of Macondo. So corruption first starts, and we see it with the people who guide the city, and they choose who comes and who doesn't, till eventually, you know, the gypsies, and, you know, they come and start making deals and giving knickknacks in order to be pushed into the city, you know. It wasn't accepted at first, and then we see later on in the civil wars where we have the liberals versus the conservatives, and and they're trying to corrupt each other, and they're miscounting votes, and they're all involved in it, and this corruption just continues. And so next we have when the Americans come and they start building the banana factory, and they're corrupting the workers, and if you're not working hard, we're going to kill you, or we're not going to pay you well, and all the money you do make can only go back towards us. And so I thought that was interesting, and a point that I wanted to make, and it's just it's gut-wrenching when they talk about the killing of Colonel Arbuin Diaz's sons. When he says that he's going to come back and kill the Americans, they unfortunately go after all 17 of his sons, and 17 people die. It really is tragic, and then followed right after that is the strike in the square, which is just described in this like a hallucinating haze, and it's almost like it's not real, and there's almost no witnesses in the murder of over 3,000 workers, and they're taken off on trains and put away because they're not in Macondo, they're outside, and, you know, they're across, but only 2 people survive, and one little boy, and then Jose Arcadio Segundo, and so we think that the boy is Gabriel Marquez in his life, and I just thought that was interesting. But yeah, so Jose Arcadio Segundo locks himself in a room, and he seems like a crazy man because no one else noticed it, and that's just the corruption. And weirdly enough, it reminds me of this song that I listened to. It's by The Weeknd. It's called House of Balloons, and it's about like taking the drug and trying to convince a person on the drug that they're in a good place and that they're happy even when they're not. You know, it's this corruption and misleading, and they're trying to make people seem crazy. And I just thought that was really, really interesting. Any points that you want to make there? Yeah, so I just want to like quickly talk about like the relationship between religion and myth and science in the book. In the beginning, Jose Arcadio, he founds the village of Macondo in science belief. You know, he came there with tools that he used for science, and, you know, then eventually these weird occurrences start happening, and then we see the gypsies, and they come along, and they provide myths with flying carpets and special people and rings, and all these mythical things, and then as we continue the myth and the science, it's hand in hand, and it's very prevalent throughout the whole story. And then eventually religion plays a part, but religion is also tied into myth, as in the priest and Fernanda are like the major promoters in the village of God, and Amaranta kind of believes in it, but the priest uses myth by using chocolate to levitate, to convince people of a god. And so I just thought that, that's just like an interesting point, because myth is also religion, but it's not like people want to keep it separate for a reason. And you have people who are like Pilar Tanera, and she does the cards, and she tells cards, and that's a myth, but she also, a lot of people believe it as a religion through the book. And so I just think that's really interesting. And I also think it's interesting that through the power of God and myth, they're able to live so old. Nice. Yeah. So another thing I just want to talk about, a concept that is constantly reappearing, is mirrors. So we first see it, when the family and they look in the mirrors, and they use mirrors, and they identify themselves. But mirrors are really relevant, and in the reflection of each generation, they reflect each other, and it's the circle, right? It's the circle that reflects each other. One specific example would be the twins when they were born, and they grew up doing it on purpose of reflecting each other like a mirror. And then even later, at the very end of the story, in the final pages, when Jose Arcadio, great grandson, is reading those final paragraphs, and he's reading his destiny as his ending. He's reading the end of his own life, and as he's skipping pages, he's looking at himself, and he's reflecting on himself, and so he skips pages because he doesn't want to look at the things he did. He acknowledges that. And so he's basically staring at a mirror of himself, watching himself, and that's described in the book beautifully, I'd say, by Gabriel Marquez. And he's just describing how the weird experience of how it was already written 100 years in this mirror. It's just a mirror of after generation of generation, and it's already written. And so I just thought mirrors were like a big concept that at first I didn't grasp, but then the final paragraph just makes it really, really clear of what is trying to be said. Another thing I just want to touch on is some more concepts that are small or bigger, like some greed, romance, tragedy, heartbreak, and solitude. So the greed, a lot of the members of Macondo are greedy, and we see this most with Aleno Bonera Secundo, and he is he's driven by money. He does it, and he takes money, and he spends it all on champagne, and he's exploiting his situation with is actually his wife Fernanda, who's a God believer, and he loves her, but he spends his time with another woman named Petra Rocote, who is a drive for greed, because she's able to produce more animals than everyone else, right? And so when he's near her, he makes money, and so he drifts with her. He almost lives with her rather than his wife, and so it's actually like a really big deal in the story. And so that's like kind of like part of the romance, that the romance is just so different, and there's so many aspects to it. We have between Rebecca and Amaranta and their feud over Pietro Caspi, who wanted Rebecca, but then Amaranta didn't want that to happen because she couldn't have the person she wanted. And then Rebecca ends up getting Jose Arcadio when he comes home, and she doesn't care that he's his brother, which, weird again. But so Pietro Caspi ends up slitting his wrist and killing himself over this tragic heartbreak that he faces. And so it's just like there's just love leads to death a lot in the story. Like there's a lot of death and tragedy that comes from romance and greed. And so I just want to say that like these concepts and these messages all kind of are just prevalent throughout the story, and they all repeat themselves, and they're hammered into you, and everything starts the same and ends the same. Like solitude, it starts with solitude, the village is lonely, it ends with solitude, the village again is lonely, and they don't deserve to start over, and so I just thought that was some more just very interesting things. So that's just something I want to talk about. And that'll bring us right into today's sponsor portion of the video today. Oh, I think I might be getting a message. Oh, let's check it out.
A book is our window to another world, exposing you to anything your mind can hold. Another life, a different time. It can build you up, break you, make you weak in all the right ways. But reading together, as a community, as friends and family, now, that'll teach you things you never knew. How to see through someone else's eyes. It's our chance to create a conversation together. A way to know that we're not alone. To question who and what we are. And even what we may yet be. The only thing we won't be is the same. Read with us.
That's right, guys. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Oprah Winfrey Book Club. Join the free website today to publish and share your opinions, or check it out on Apple TV for free. To celebrate the sponsor of today's video, everyone watching will get a free lifetime subscription to listen to my podcast as many times as you guys would like. That's right. And so in honor of that, we will read a quick passage from the website regarding today's novel. This is from a user. For many of the characters, indeed, life becomes synonymous with suffering, and a reoccurring motif is withdrawn from the world in a symbolic retreat to the refuge of the womb. Peace of mind is ultimately achieved only when the characters opt out of active emotional involvement in life and accept the fate that they have been given. Back to the rest of the video. Thank you for sponsoring us today, Oprah. Have a great day. For our closing remarks today, I just want to end it off with the reason of why everyone should read this novel and its purpose. So, I will leave it off for our guest today, Ethan, to finish it off and give your reasoning of why anyone should pick up this book and read it. I think so. I just want to close it out here, and this is information I've gotten from the internet and from my personal reading and readers and viewers of the channel, and just sources that I've discovered: LitHub, YouTube, John Green, Hank Green, all of the above. And so I just want to quickly just go over why I think this book should be recommended. And I think that the clear main point in this story is probably too didactic to be considered great literature, though many disagree. To me, the acclaim it is merited on personal intellectual grounds. Personally, I found the book so just moving in so many different ways. And just has so much emotion of every kind, of funny, sad, angry, and it shifts between drama and the rhythms of everyday life and the hidden meanings of philosophy. And there's so many ideas that it could be turned into 3 or 4 books, no problem. And I think that on an intellectual level, there are several remarkable achievements with this book. Firstly, the realistic aspect of magical realism that I touched on earlier in the podcast is strong, where it has to be, and little details of personal quirks and the physical structures and the layout of the town and so on, and it just makes the magical effects all more enchanting and the mysteries just that much better. And so stepping back to view the whole of the narrative, we see coherence despite its vast sweep, one that keeps focus on the central family and their location, while also showing the passage of time and the play of more important themes and broader themes. And even stepping back a little further, we see a surreal yet profound recapitulation of Colombian history, that of Latin America more generally. And so we see the cycles of Latin America during this time of rebellion and despotism and imperialism and resistance and enlightenment and forgetting. And so it's all stuffed into the novel in one go. And even things in the design of the town, etc. This makes the magical effects and the enhancing of riddles and mysteries just that more fascinating. And when we take a step back to look at the narratives of the structure, we can see that despite its large scope, it maintains focus while just showing the themes of everything. And so just to sum it up, I just think that everyone should read this literature at least once or even maybe twice. I myself have read it, wanted to read it twice. I'm halfway through a second reading just so I can understand and provide more information and context today at this podcast. And thank you. Wow, Ethan, that was really long, but it was also really great. And so I just really appreciate you coming on the pod today. Hope you have a great and fantastic day in the rest of your year, and I hope to see you on the show again. Have a great day.